Welcome to Winter Solstice Storytelling. I am by Tasha. Thank you. Before I do anything, just for existing, let us clap for everyone. Thank you for existing in this world. And thank you to everyone coming together. This is via Zoom. This is me gathering all of you together to celebrate the winter solstice the way that's been calling to me for many, many years. And by reminding ourselves of our own inner spark and our own creativity, and that we really can remake the world the way that we have always wanted to right now in this moment by speaking in the present tense. So I am grateful for gathering with all of you here and all of you here, and feel so grateful, grateful, grateful. So I welcome you to take a deep breath and stretch and invite in all of yourself to this moment. I'm finding touching my own arms and placing my own hands on my own heart. It's really centering and grounding and brings me more fully into my body, which is a great avenue into the present moment. Welcome to the paradigm of peace, where we all come together in this great knowing that we all want peace and safety and love. We have these great universal human needs. And perhaps life hasn't come about the way that we expected it, but here we are now. And lots of curveballs will come, but we know there's so much knowing here. And we can speak, we can use our full and authentic selves, our full, crazy, quirky, wild selves, and bringing it out there to entertain each other, to educate each other, to lead each other, to embrace each other, to everything. So, without further ado, I want to pass it over to Neil, who will be speaking the story, My Great Aha Moment.
Okay, thank you. So as some of you know, and I think I've mentioned it here, I do memory training, and I've been doing it for 8 years. And often when I teach a student the method, they go, wow, that's so great. How come I never learned that method before? If it's so good, you know, how come it's been a big secret? And I tell them things like, which is true, like it was big in ancient Greece, but after the printing press was developed, we don't do it that much anymore. And then with electronic media, we don't use this method much anymore. And there's a bunch of other reasons why the method isn't used. Then one day, I had this aha experience that really explained, and I tell this story, and it explains it, I think, better than any of my list of reasons why could explain it. And so here's what happened, and here's the story that I tell to my memory students. A couple of years ago, I got into making ramen soup. I got really big into it. And I even had a ramen soup party. So I had to buy a bunch of pots and pans. I had a 3-gallon vat for the soup stock. I had a pot to boil the noodles, a pot to steam the dumplings, a pot to steam the vegetables. I had pots and pans all over the stove. So if I wanted to fry an egg, I had to like move pots and pans all over the place. I had a storage problem. You know, it's not like a major life changing problem, but it was a minor irritant. So one day I had a woman named Ramona over the house. She was a Brazilian woman. She was cleaning my house. And she was in the kitchen and she was cleaning. And I said, Ramona, you got any ideas about like all the pots and pans on the stove? And she said this to me. She said, how much do you use your oven? And I said this to her, I'll never forget it. I said, I don't use my oven. And it's true. I didn't use my oven. I don't make pies. I don't make casseroles. I go somewhere else for Thanksgiving. I don't use my oven. There was this major, cavernous, capacious space unused right there in the middle of my kitchen that's been staring at me for a year while I'm making a big deal out of all these pots and pans on the top of my stove that I can't figure out what to do with. And here's this space in my oven. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this guy's an idiot. And it's true, when it comes to the kitchen, I am an idiot. I'll fess up to that. And I had a storage problem and I had a very simple solution to it. So what I wanted to suggest, what I have suggested to my memory students is that they have storage problems. That's the reason they're taking my class, is because they have memory storage problems. And that there is this major storage space that's been staring them right in the face for all this time that they didn't know about, just the way I didn't know about it. Now, admittedly, for me to use this solution, all I had to do was open my oven and put the pots and pans inside. I mean, it was a pretty simple solution to the problem. For them to use the memory method that I was teaching them, it's not quite so simple. There's things you have to learn in order to be able to use the storage space that's available that they could use. But in any event, the space is there. It's been right there all this time. And then I invite them to make me their cleaning lady and let me point them to the oven that they have available to them. And often they go, oh, and that's how I make my point about memory method. And that's my story to you. So thank you very much.
Thinking a lot about the things I've been reading in the news about people wanting to know when we can go back to the way things were. And it seems there are a lot of people who are having a hard time with the way things are now and sort of looking back in bitterness. And then I was reminded of the story of Lot and what became of his wife. And I thought, I want to know more about her, who she was, what's her name. And I couldn't find a whole lot because there isn't a whole lot of Lot's wife. But I decided to spend some time on that story. And the more I thought about it, I thought, we really haven't heard from her and about what her process of looking back was all about. So this is my rendition. By the way, her name, as far as I could find out, was either Edith or Edith or Edo. So I just picked one to go with. So the title of my piece is Edith, Wife of Lot. I look back in remembrance of 2 daughters I had left behind, and in grief for what was to come to my other 2, still with me then. I did not harden into a plinth, a column, a pillar, while sand blew about my face. I stood and let the salt run from my eyes. And for this, my husband, the drunk, abandoned me in the desert and did then unspeakable things. Who knows what became of that man? I had hoped terrible troubles would visit him and that I might live to hear of them. For that, I am not sorry. I am no pillar in the desert, no statue of stone, I grieve for no city or drunk man. I remain as I was, a mother, mourning and blessing all her beloved daughters.
Ooh.
That's it.
Here's the great story. Some 14 billion years ago, all the matter that is now seen in our universe was compressed into one tiny point. And then it went rapid expansion. Beginnings of coalescing. Stars springing into shining light. Some of the stars reaching the end of their lifespan, that's the word, exploding into supernovas. Out of the supernovas, all the heavier elements. These elements, along with the original elements of hydrogen and some helium, flowing through the universe, more coalescing, various formations of stars, galaxies, many galaxies, inside of galaxies, different things happening, planets emerging, gravity doing its thing, certain planet, various forms of interrelationship, chemical reactions, biological things beginning to happen. Oh my God, how did that happen? No one really knows. Woo! Then different kinds of processes, evolutionary processes. And now, just as many particles in one place as there are stars in the universe, and here I am, and you, and you, and you, and you. Woo! 14 billion years later, right here, right now. That was quite a journey. Whew. Boy, you know, we're pretty upset with each other, finding ourselves on this planet, trying to figure out how to live and do this thing. But if you think about it, we're just getting, I don't know, it's trillions of particles to cooperate and make this body be able to do this shit. That's amazing. And then we're gonna get how many? 7, 8 billion of us to cooperate? Holy schmoly. Oh no, it's crazy. I'm pretty sad, I'm pretty scared, I'm pretty determined, I'm very inspired. I'm down, I'm beaten. What about this? Wait a minute, I got it in the wrong place, sorry. Yeah. You know, there's a saying, the only way out is through. Who wants to skip out? Sometimes. Anybody? Netflix all night long. Cabin away in the woods. Oh, if only I could hug everybody. Here we are. This great story unfolding. Isn't it incredible to think that the particles emerging from the beginning of the universe are operating in my body and in yours right now? That is one heck of a story. And so let us consider together wonderful and inspiring and ever memorable injunctive. Is that the correct term? The poet, recently late poet Mary Oliver. And what is it then that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life right now, in this moment, on this planet? Going around this sun, in this solar system, this galaxy, this universe, and back down right here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And
Persephone speaks, and we're going to do Act 1. Act 1. When I was young, I only knew life. I would whisper in the wind, flourish the flora, paint the world with bold strokes, simultaneous green frog pearl, blue swim lash, purple hiccup in a buttercup, no end to variety, gaiety, connection, and growth. But then,
we sometimes lose the top of your head.
me too. Thank you.
Won't you sign me over to another year?
Something happened, something bad. A hole opened and I fell in, longing for my mother in the darkness, with a man called Death, a man who knew of only dried decay and cold, slimy things and separation. He said he loved me, and he gave me silver and gold, but I wouldn't take them because they were cold, making my skin ever whiter and ever more inept. I just wanted the sun, the light, juicy life.
Well, what is this? And I can't see the nice old hand taking hold of me. Well, I am death, none can excel. I've opened the door to heaven on earth.
Oh, hold on a minute. Yes? My mother went looking for me and went to the highest gate. The gatekeeper said nothing could be done, but she saw he had the staff of the underworld and the underground one in his hand, having made deals himself. So she used her power as a woman to create life again. And that's when I saw the seed. Don't eat, they said. Like, oh, that seed. pulsing light, dripping essence. How could I not go towards the only thing that was of me and not him? This blood red juice. You can stop the girl. They're trying to take our voices. They're trying to make our choices. So we scream loud, loud. I know you feel the lightning, and it's so exciting. Don't we wake up? You can't stop the from going. You can't stop the world from knowing. The truth will set you free. We forget that seeds need the dark. We forget that in stillness the thought of life was made. I bite, I partake in death. I see that I can be more complex than I thought, that I will one day be freer than the freest seed in the wind's wildest dream. You can't stop from going. The truth will set you free. You can't stop the
The end. This is amazing. I've been so isolated here, as is everybody else, but oh my God, I love these stories and I love meeting everybody and everyone's energy. I'm experiencing it vicariously and it's bringing me life. So I have a story about going swimming in the wintertime. It was right around the time of the solstice. It might have been a bit after. This was several years ago. A friend of mine and we went to get some hot chocolates and we had these piping hot cups of hot chocolate and they were just so delicious smelling and we couldn't wait to drink them. And we drove down to the beach. And at the time, the sand was covered in snow and the ocean had chunks of ice floating on top of it. And so everything was like desolate and beautiful and white and cold. And I looked out at the beach and I said to my friend, you know what? We should go swimming right now. I was just feeling it. I was ready to take the plunge and we had these hot chocolates. So I knew that once we got out of the water, we'd have something warm to drink and it would be all right. We'd warm back up and be toasty. And so we both shook on it and we both stripped down to our underwear. There was nobody on the beach, nobody in sight. So we just decided to go in our undies because why get your clothes, your only pair of clothes soaking wet in the winter. And so we run out of the car in our undies and we run through the snow and we run through the ice and we plunge into the water and we scream and we run back out and we run back to the car and I pull on the door handle of my car and I locked us out of the car. My keys are inside on the driver's seat next to our two hot cups of hot chocolate and our clothes and my cell phone and everything that we need to get ourselves out of this shit situation is in the car. And so I turned to my friend Tam and I'm like, I am so sorry. What are we gonna do? And we're in the middle of nowhere. So we just decided to start walking in our underwear in the freezing cold. And we start walking and who do we see turn up on the beach but these two figures who are just kind of walking through the parking lot, and one, I kid you not, is wearing a cloak with a hood, and I'm thinking to myself, of all the people right now whose help I could solicit, this is the last person who I want to go ask for help. This cloaked figure in the parking lot. But we walk up to them and I told them, I said, I am so sorry to be in my underwear right now. But I just locked us out of the car. And these fellas were just coming back from a Star Wars convention. And so the cloaked fellow was Anakin Skywalker. Little did I know, I met the real Anakin with his little piggy rat tail and everything. And then his friend had on this hot Barbie pink, awesome Star Wars shirt with like every Star Wars character on it. And these guys were like nerd supreme. They were amazing. And they they quickly and generously invited us back to their house, where we went. And that was the first time that I'd ever watched the Isabella Rossellini YouTube videos, Green Porn, which if you haven't watched them, you got to check them out. But these two Star Wars guys were all about Isabella Rossellini. So, and luckily they let me use their phone. I knew that this wasn't a time I could call my parents. I called my best friend and she came by and she was a saint. She drove all the way to my folks' house, got my spare key to my car, drove all the way back, picked us up, brought me to our car and saved our cold butts. That is my story.
Yay, go Allison! From puppies to fierce female power. Woo!
So when I was 16, our family had one of the first golden retrievers back in the 60s, and I bred her with another. Could I just get this picture of me off there?
Oh, sure.
I need to see the people. So we bred her with another purebred golden, and she had 14 puppies that all lived. 14 all lived. I cooked for her mulligan stew every day, and the first puppy was born on my head. And anyway, so I made $1,000 though, because I did a sliding scale, and I charged between $150, that was the highest amount for the big males, and then I had to give away a couple, but so I made $1,000, and I decided to go to Europe and bring a girlfriend of mine to Europe to visit my French aunt and my French great aunt. So we hopped on a plane, Europe, and we were visiting my great aunt in Paris. And one evening we decided to take a stroll, Jody and I. We didn't know where we really were, but we walked down a road that wasn't lit that well. And we just were exploring, teenagers. And all of a sudden I saw 5 men come running toward us, and I ran as fast as I could, just ran like the Dickens. And then I turned around though, and I saw that they had captured my friend Jody. So it was without a single thought about what to do or how to handle it. I just had this incredible rage come up into me, and I started running back to Jody and the guys, yelling at the top of my lungs, "You let her go!" I think I really called them assholes too, but I just was like, "You let her go!" I was just like, the adrenaline was just surging. I felt like, and so what happened is they let her go. They let her go. And 5, these were big French guys, probably, in their 20s, that had captured her. They had their hands on her. She was walking slowly. So anyway, I always wondered what I would do in an emergency. And I found out and I felt really, really like strong and powerful. Like, I can handle anything. So that's it.
My name's Tommy, and I'm telling a story about my friend Ginny. And she shared it with a small group of us as we were waiting for an Easter dinner to be completed 1 year. I have her permission to share the story, otherwise I wouldn't be doing so. And it relates a little bit to one of the things that's unique about me, in that I've studied death and dying for many decades with Kubler-Ross and so forth. So Ginny is a friend of mine who grew up in New York City. And she was pregnant with her second child. And she was married to a man who was not very reliable. In fact, he had a drug problem. So it was very unreliable, actually. And she was bleeding during the time where she should have delivered. She was late and she was bleeding. So she naturally went to the doctor and everything. And they said, well, let's give it a little more time, and then we'll check further and everything. And so finally she went back to the doctor again. And he said to her, can I get busted for like telling a little medical secret here that people aren't supposed to know? Is that possible? You guys don't know that. You're just my audience. But anyway, I'm going to share a little piece. So she said she was in the hospital and the doctor examined her and said, listen, I'm going to tell you something that if you tell anybody that I told you this, I'll tell them that you're a liar, because I can't risk you telling this. He said, you need to go home tonight and drink a shot and a beer, and that baby will be out of your body within 8 to 12 hours. I guarantee you it works almost every single time. So if you want to deliver a baby without a lot of negative input, a very brief, there it is. So Ginny went home and did that. And she said to her husband, listen, the doctor said that I will be delivering this baby within probably 8 hours. So I'm going to need you to be available for me in the morning. So she got up in the morning and she was bleeding quite a bit. And of course, her husband had already skated looking for whatever he needed. And she was on her own. But she managed to get from her home a few blocks to the hospital. The hospital, however, it was a Sunday, and the hospital was a teaching hospital. So all the physicians and students had already done their 120 hours or whatever ridiculous thing it is. And it was basically empty, except for one medical student and an anesthesiologist. And there's Ginny bleeding profusely, 2 weeks late now with her second child. And the baby is coming out, trying to come out, but it's not really happening. So I don't know if they were in the emergency room or wherever they were, maybe the maternity ward, and she was trying to deliver the child, but the cord was wrapped around the baby's neck 3 times. And so obviously that was the problem. And so the medical student and the doctor, the anesthesiologist, were trying to cut the cord off of the baby's neck without harming the baby, killing the baby potentially. And Ginny popped out of her body. She said, all of a sudden, Tommy, she was in a classic position of up in the corner of the room at the ceiling, looking down at everything that was taking place. 2 doctors trying to save her life and the life of the baby. I don't know if they even know that she had passed at that point or not, but she was out of her body watching this thing happen. And then all of a sudden, she said, my baby shot out of my body. Like a Roman candle, she described it as, and went boom, right out the window of the hospital. And naturally, what's a mama to do? Followed that baby out of that hospital and just kept going and going with her eyes fixed on her child, didn't want to lose her baby. And she said, all of a sudden, I couldn't find my baby anymore. And there I am, and I'm standing there, and I hear this music, and I look over, and there's a waterfall, and the water's hitting a stream or a little brook down below. And as it hits, it's making music. Beautiful, beautiful music. And then I looked at the foliage that was surrounding the little stream and everything. And as is always described, the foliage, the colors in the foliage were so bright and vivid. They were like, it's like they're lit, literally like lit, gorgeous. And she was blown away, and she turned further And she saw this man that many of us know as the great just Jesus, a bodhisattva who walked the earth and moved on to an incredible place. And Jesus was acting as a tour guide, she said, with a whole group of people there. And he was showing them around, saying, ah, check out the waterfall, you know, and everything. And he spotted Ginny out of the blue. And he said, oh, hi, don't you love the waterfall? And Ginny said, yeah, it's beautiful, but I can't stay here. I have to go. He said, why do you have to go? She said, because I have to find my baby, and I have another baby at home, and I have to take care of my children. And Jesus said, give me your hands. And he took her hands. And in that moment, his eyes closed and opened right up. And he said, oh my, you have been busy. And just like that, Ginny and her daughter were back in their bodies. And I met her daughter when she was 26 years old. And that's a true story about why, an example of how it is that death does not exist. We transform into other places. You will never die. That's 37 years of my experience. And that's the story. Isn't it wonderful? I love that story.
Once there were two brothers, and they were as different as apples and elephants. And when they grew up, they were more different still. See, the oldest brother, the first brother, he was really good at planning. And, well, there's nothing wrong with planning. He kind of planned things to death. And the second brother, the younger brother, he was good at sharing. And some people said that he shared more than was his, but you know, he only shared what was his. So he didn't make much money, but he had lots of fun. And his lady said of him that he read aloud to her on Sunday afternoons and cuddled with her by the fire on cold winter's nights. And he wrapped his arms around her, even in public sometimes. He left her alone sometimes too. He did it all. He listened and spoke. He read and wrote. He laughed and loved and did it all. And sometimes when he'd leave her alone too. So one time when he was leaving her alone, some fella shared with him 10 pounds of chocolate. And as it was a warm day, he put that 10 pounds of chocolate under his hat and he headed for home. Well, you know, there wouldn't be a story if something didn't happen, but what happened is just unbelievable. You see, he felt a little tired as he was walking home, and as it was that hot day, he saw a nice little shadow formed by a boulder. So he sat down in that boulder's shadow and he leaned on back and fell asleep. Well, the sun moved, but he didn't. His hat didn't move, but the chocolate did. It melted down his face, down the back of his neck. It melted down and down till he was covered from the top of his head to the tip of his toe in chocolate. Think he woke up then? No. Well, the sun went down and the moon came up, and that warm day turned into a cold night, and chocolate all hardened up. Think he woke up then? Nope. Well, it got even later, and it was really dark, and all of a sudden there was a big snap, and the boulder opened up, and out came a goblin family. And weren't those little goblin children excited to see a chocolate man sitting right outside their front door? Well, the mother goblin, she goes, no chocolate till after supper. And so they picked him on up and they put him down inside the house. And well, they went off to find some supper. Lucky for that younger brother, the goblin home was warm. So the chocolate loosened up in no time. And he wasted no time running on home. His lady was really glad to see him, not just because she loved him, but she got to eat the chocolate off him. And that's when she found those gold coins. Why, they must have got stuck to him when he was in the goblin's house. Well, now he did have a little bit of money. And when his older brother heard about that, The chocolate and the goblins and the gold? Why? Yeah. No, I said he was good at planning, and he started planning right away. And since this had to do with him making lots of money, he put it right into effect. He went downtown, he bought himself some 10 pounds of chocolate, put it under his hat, went over to the boulder, and he sat in the shade, and he waited. Well, the sun moved, he didn't. His hat didn't move, but the chocolate did. It melted down his face, down the back of his neck, down and down till he was covered from the tip of his head to the top of his shoes in chocolate. Think he moved then? Nah, he's still thinking about that goblin gold. Well, the sun went down and the moon came up, and that warm day turned into a cold night. The chocolate hardened all up, and think he moved then? No, still thinking about the goblin gold. Well, it got really late, and that boulder snapped open, and out came the goblin family. Weren't those little goblin boys and girls excited to see another chocolate man sitting out in front of their son's front steps? Well, the mama goblin, she says, "We ain't letting this one get away." And well, think he moved then? No, he was scared stiff. Besides, the first thing they did was bite off his head. And the younger brother, he lived happily ever after. And his lady always said of him that he read aloud to her on lazy Sunday afternoons and by the fire on cold winter's nights. That he wrapped his arms around her, even in public sometimes, and he left her alone sometimes too. He did it all. He listened, he spoke, he read, he wrote, he thought, he felt, he loved, he was. And once in a while, he bought his lady a little chocolate. And that's the story of the Chocolate Man. I hope you enjoyed it.
So, like I say, I sometimes, I'm not sure if this constitutes the story, but it's the context, kind of as John Sprague was talking about, and some similarity with what the one about the three coils around our neck, in that I'm thinking about how Saturn and Jupiter are going to be conjunct tomorrow at 1:22. And this is the first time this happens in 800 years. And I've been aware of other things that have collected in my knowing about this is these two giant planets have been protecting us in their own separate movements and dances through space. Their gravitational fields often protect us from asteroids hitting this planet. And if these asteroids had hit, maybe we wouldn't be here telling stories. Like that would definitely get in the way. So I'm just having this feeling about these protective parents in a way who are wanting us to grow up. And I'm feeling this warmth of humanity that I'm feeling with our listening and with our talking, and how nice it is to just hear our voices here, that maybe the whole universe is feeling this way. And then now that they become conjunct, the ancient Greek story is Jupiter, which is Zeus in the Greek, was actually eaten by Saturn, which is Cronus in the Greek, and was in the belly of Cronus, in the intestinal labyrinth and the coiling that is the limited nature of so many times in which we withdraw or aren't quite ready to do something. It creates this like this spring factor, like the coiling of a spring, because as we're caught in that, as Jupiter is being digested inside of Saturn, which is what's happening right now, that wish to blow up and to come out gets ever stronger, almost to the level of what happens with a star. And I feel like the feeling of us putting a foot down on the planet, but then having a foot up on the planet, and then a foot down on the planet, then a foot up, that this is these back and forth energies of Jupiter and Saturn. So the fact that this is such a significant time, obviously, in our life, in the history of the Earth, this 800-year journey of taking care of us, of weaving over these years where we are now, and coming together to meet again to see how has it gone. I have this image of us getting ready for the sunrise, for the sun to return, and that everybody's on a mountaintop, on this one mountaintop, on different rocks, getting ready to watch this sun that is not just a sunrise, but it's like the sunrise of a new world, like the sunrise for the first time, like a different quantum sun. And I'm imagining the light on the faces as the day grows, as everyone looks at this sunrise, and how people go through their life with different angles of light, and how we go through different perceptions of ourselves and different degrees of moods and being lost, and how powerful it is that we decided to be here. Like we wanted this life like Jupiter, and we accepted our forgetting. As Neil says, we forget. And we go through this game, this mirage, this Halloween masquerade party. And it's very poignant to me, the humanity of forgetting ourselves and then remembering ourselves. And for me, in that image, I felt like I needed to go down to the bottom of the mountain before I found my rock. And I felt like there was something in a museum, something that a whole museum was surrounded around, something precious. And I needed to go see it one more time. It was in the middle of a city and this was its prized jewel possession, but I couldn't remember what it was. And as I went in there, I realized that I'd left my bike on the bike rack without the key to my lock. And then I had a pretend lock on that row of bikes. And because I was worried that my bike would get stolen, in the sense, and then realizing that, oh, we're in this sort of strata of a class society, that I have a bike, there's many people who don't have a bike, and then they lose, and then that bike goes away. It drops down. And that feeling of dropping down made me feel like, okay, that's Saturn energy, but the bike is this energy of like, Jupiter coming out, wanting to go find things, wanting to go see the world. Like you can get on a bike, leave your house and see anything. And my father, who was an adventurer, became part of the nuclear suburban family life. And one day decided to take his bike into Boston from Lexington. And the one day that he took his bike and biked those 20 miles, his bike got stolen that one day. And then he got another bike. And then he went the other direction once for a bike ride, to be by himself, to get back to that Jupiter adventure self. And our dog ran after him, wanting to join the adventure. And he just would bike down a hill so fast that he lost the dog. And then we lost our dog. And that dog, who had wanted to be like Jupiter and go companion out into the wild world, had gotten lost, which was a very sort of like Persephone, getting. So this image I have is of being somewhere and needing to go further down, to go find my bike, to go find my dog. And I go over a banister and there's all these people down below, and it's a really long jump. And I realize that I'm going to hurt myself if I go. And everyone down below doesn't want me to land on their heads. And so they look up and they go, "What are you going to do?" And then I notice, with being public at that moment, I get back up on the banister and then find another way, like the labyrinth of Saturn, to go on the way down. And there's something about going down, what Saturn is bringing us down, that's going to help us be this cardinal Earth Capricorn mountain that brings us up in this Jupiter place that's full and secure, like a pillar, like Lot's wife. And that there's some kind of way in which this tension that we're feeling that could spring out, that it feels very much like pulling back a bow, and all the labyrinth of our muscles are connected shoulder to shoulder. and we're pulling back, and Jupiter's getting smaller and smaller, so that at some point, some sort of light comes in and we can see the seed of where we're going, and we release it. And at that releasing point, the sun will rise and we'll all be on our own rock, and we'll be just where we've always meant to be ever since the Big Bang began.
So 2 years ago, just before the solstice, David was in the hospital. My husband, who was 94 at the time, and we had said when we got into the hospital that we wanted a beautiful death. And so he did end up dying on Monday, but this was Saturday. And the doctor said to him, "You're going to die." And because and David said, "Why?" And he had a little dementia. And the doctor said, "Because you're not making any more red blood cells." And David said, "I am never going to die." And I said, "You're right, David. That which is essential in you will never die." So the next day, on Sunday, he said to me, "Do you think it would be proper for me to die?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm ready." And I said, "I'm ready too." So Monday, his grandson hitched a ride 13 hours from Oberlin to say goodbye to his granddad. And when he arrived, David was not able to say anything more than one word in answer to a question. So Ewan was regretting that he had arrived at this time so late. And he said, "I wish I could have spoken and had a conversation with David or with Sheppy." And I said, "Well, what would you want to talk about?" And he said, "I'd want to talk with him about creativity." So I thought, I bet we could have this conversation. I will ask one yes and no questions to David. And so I said to David, "You think everybody is creative, right?" And David said, "Yes." But you realize that not everybody is in touch with their creativity. And he said, "Yes." And what you love to do, David, right, was to get people connected to their creative spark. And he said, "Yes." And I said, "And that is what your life has been about. Your whole life has been about." And he said, "Yes." And that is the last thing he said on this side. And when I took Ewan home that night, from when we arrived, we got the call that David had passed. And then in telling people about it, it was about 10 o'clock or so, I had called a friend of mine who was a psychic and tell her I couldn't meet with her the next day. And she said, "Oh, that's fine." I told her why. And she said, "Oh, do you want to talk to him?" And I said, "Oh, okay." All right. So I put it on speaker, and through Evie, David said, "It was a lot easier than I thought. I just let go and floated out. And you were right, Nancy. my essence is intact and I'm complete and whole. And it's so exciting here. There are so many people. Now, I want you to explore your freedom, explore relationships. And when you're done, we'll be together, only we'll be the same age.
Musical interlude. I'll do that. It's a song by Charlie King and the Total Experience Gospel Choir. It will be familiar to many of you. If you know it, sing along. It's called Light is Returning. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn. Gotta keep it burning, gotta keep this light of hope alive, make safe our journey through the storm. One planet she's turning, circling in her path around the sun. Earth Mother she's calling her children home. Her children home. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the dawn.
Welcome by Tasha. She's a Appaloosa unicorn with rainbow fluffy clouds. I don't know. And gotta have some rainbow sparkle going on because I am telling a tragic love story. It is 1923, and I am walking in the forest, exploring different nooks and crannies. I know these woods like my palms. The lines in my palms are like the trails of the creatures finding food, gathering food. So I know the forest very well. And yes, this is a while ago. And a woman traveling freely in the forest is a beautiful, rare thing sometimes. And luckily, you're part of my story, Papa.
Lucky me.
I have a papa who believes that women can take care of themselves, can defend themselves, can survive, and that free women need to be everywhere and exploring the woods and feeling safe in their skin, in their environment. And also, luckily, I'm about 16 and usually I would have been married by now in some cultures. And I am so happy and grateful that my papa, so grounding. He believes in marriage for love because that happened to him, the fictional papa too. My mom and my papa met and they just knew this is with Bashir, this is their destiny. And so they ended up marrying young and for love and grew into each other so that they really supported each other from a young age. They saw all the wrinkles happen. And I wanted that for myself as well. And one of these excursions into the woods, I see a gathering of people. Hello people. And they're welcoming some stranger from this new land. He's got dark curly hair. It's really like intriguing because we're more like lighter haired, and it's exciting because all the boys in my town, I don't feel a destiny, a calling, a beshert, a beloved in them. And I'm so free. I love my freedom, but I see this person and I get so intrigued by them. And I go to my papa and I'm just a little bit, happier than usual. I got a big smile on my face. And my papa asks me, what's different? what's different about you today? And I tell him, you know, some curiosity. I'm just curious about this person. And so the next day, my papa decides to speak to our neighbors and ask who is this newcomer, get some more information about them, and then tells about my love of freedom and that I make a really good challah bread and this yummy beet soup. And so, you know, he's kind of like talking me up and telling this family that, you know, possibly I might want to be betrothed to him, because that's what happened sometimes, is that the parents took a more active role in that. And yet this person was listening on the other side of the door and fell in love with me just from my papa's description about me, and knew that on a basic level we would get along, and had his own curiosity about me. And so, you know, this actually works out, this part of the story where we're betrothed, we get to know each other, we go on long walks in the forest, holding hands, taking it slow, very, 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 very slow, building friendship. And we have a lovely spring wedding. It's magical, there are birds singing, and the new spring green is popping out. And soon I become full with child. I don't know how big that would be. And then, yeah, we have this beautiful little house. He becomes a jeweler's apprentice, and he makes me some nice, simple jewelry, gold and silver. And we have 2 children. We have this beautiful garden and the woods, and we're exploring and learning about each other each and every day, and growing in love. And unfortunately, but not. Okay, so we have some news. Some news from the outsiders came that there were invaders, and they were specifically targeting us. And it wasn't scary at first, but because I'm going to the future a little bit and what happens. And okay. Okay. The news that the Germans have invaded, Nazis have invaded, and it all happens pretty fast. And yet it feels so far away, so far away. And this bewilderment, like, why would they target us? And we do get news that they're coming to our village. We wrap our children up and we take a loaf of bread, whatever we can grab, and we flee into the forest. Luckily, I know the forest, so we survive and we find a village. And we go to that village, and there's a trader that my husband works with, and we find shelter. And yet we don't know them. It's a little scary. They're a little shy. They're a little, their eyes are kind of darting around, but we have shelter. And we do get another messenger that the Nazis are actually like coming to like this house to take us. Who knows where. And then we're in the floorboards of an attic in the barn. There's a lot of space, and yet I feel so cramped. I would always leave the house around 3 in the morning. I would just wake up, ready to go. And I would have my solo time in the forest. And this moment I woke up with a start and needed to be in the forest to walk. So I did. I extricated myself from my husband and my children so quietly. They were sleeping. And I left. I didn't know what I was leaving. And then I got a little lost in the forest. And it took me a while to get back. And dawn was breaking. I could see my family. I could see my family. I was hidden. There's some trees. The Nazis were surrounded my family. And those people that took us in, the looks they had, guilt and shame and like fear and like, and then the other thing of we're doing the right thing, that look. But I was frozen. I noticed everything. I was stuck behind this tree, hearing, powerless, frozen and mute. I didn't say anything. I didn't sacrifice myself. I didn't run out and yell and scream like my mom. So I watched my family being taken and I never saw them again. And I remained frozen in that time. Thank you for listening. That story needed to see the light of day and release the shadows.
Thank you for sharing that.
Great.
about when I was 18 years old, and I had just gone. It was my first 2 weeks at UMass. I had just gotten there, and I was settling in, and I was so excited to be there at UMass, and I had visited my brother there 5 years before that, and as a ninth grader, and I just remember partying with him in his room and thinking, wow, like I will do whatever it takes to get into this school or another school like it. But I really wanted to follow his footsteps. So there I was, and I had actually met a girl, and something about her was just so sweet. And so I was thinking, what could we do for our first? There was some live music right there at UMass at the Skybox Theater, and it was Chris Barron. And I had never heard of him, so I looked him up, and Chris Barron, he was the lead singer of the Spin Doctors, and I was like, oh, I think my parents actually used to play the Spin Doctors back in the day. So I was like, oh, this could be cool. So we ended up going to that, and there we were, just such a memorable night. And got up there, and a fire alarm had went off that night, and there was all kinds of people around, kind of in a frenzy, and an hour went by, and we weren't sure if the show was going to go on, and just we were all just hanging out, just waiting to see. It had to get cleared by the fire department, and so that was when he came out of his room there. I can't think of the name of it right now, but he came out, and there he was with his long blonde curly hair, looking kind of like Jesus. And there I was with my long, was froed out hair because I was trying to do dreadlocks at the time. And I was just kind of in awe. It was him and his band members. And I said, hey, are you Chris Barron? I mean, I said, yeah, you're the lead singer of the Spin Doctors, right? And he was like, yeah, that was just like, he's just like super nonchalant, and just seemed so wise. And he was like, yeah, that was just a little band that I did when I had when I was out of high school, but this is like my passion now. This is my solo project, and I hope you enjoy tonight. And he gave me a few of his CDs from this album, Shag, and he signed one for me. I asked him to sign it, and I said, hey, could you write something cool on there? So he wrote, hey, Zach, write something cool. Love, Chris Barron. So that was pretty awesome. So he ended up having 2 drummers that night, 2 bass players, 3 guitarists, backup singers, and me and my date. We just danced like, oh my gosh, it was just the best feeling in the world. It was the most beautiful, innocent connection, and we just had the best time, and we're just smiling ear to ear, and went back to my dorm that night and made out all night and held each other, and it was a really nice night. So ever since then, he's been my favorite artist. There's nobody that can compare to him, and I'm gonna sing you one of the songs, one of my favorite songs off the album. It's called Teddy. So there we go. Once Teddy came to me and told me I don't like you. I looked at Teddy and I asked him, what did I do? Said it's not every day that Teddy Bear tells you. You're grown into a charmer, but your attitude, it ain't true. When you were little, you were laughing all the time. You laughed about a quarter when you're dying for a dime. Now you just talk a lot, and I don't see your point. You got this attitude stinking up the joint. I think it's time that you thought about your life. But then I'm just your teddy bear talking like your wife. Well, mom's at a meeting and your daddy play gin rummy. I've been your teddy bear since you were in her tummy. I think I'm qualified to tell you when you're crummy. I might be a simple belle, but man, I ain't no dummy. When you were little, you were laughing all the time. You laughed about a quarter when you're dying for a dime. Now you just talk a lot, and I don't see your point. You got this attitude stinking up the joint. So I did some thinking and I went and got my teddy. I looked him in the buttons and I told him to get ready. Said it's not every day that teddy bear tells you you're growing into a charmer, but your attitude, it ain't true. All right, that's it.
That was fun. Very fun.
Very
fun.
This is a story that Ghost Dance. It starts in 2016 in North Dakota. In this there was a small tribe. It's they're having a lot of challenges. The land was hard and the life was very challenging. One of the challenges they're running into is they're posing a threat of having their water poisoned, and by industrial means. And so, with the suicide of two teenagers, the children of that tribe decided they were going to confront it versus wait. So they made plans to head to the water to protest. As the elders saw them coming up and they had recognized the story of the grandfather prophecy, where great stones will move the land and the black snake will wind through. And this is this time where all the tribes must come together to fight the black snake. And so they all came together at the water, and the elders were teaching the young how to pray into the water to fight the black snake. It was so it was a very cold winter and it was a long battle, and this was very hard fought. In the end of this, in the thawing of the winter, they had come to a truce and the black snake had halted for the moment. The army came in and moved them off the land, and they rested. With that, the elders were realizing how challenging it was for them to that they had no one really was picking up the rituals and the ceremonies and the ways of their people, and they're looking at their extinction and seeing that the prayers and ceremonies were about to leave. And with all these elders together, they were seeing that it was time to share beyond to all. And with that, there's a decision to bring them a medicine wheel, to create a medicine wheel from the and reignite the flame from the Ashadu camp, to reignite the flame and to share these rituals and these ceremonies. So we made plans for a drum circle, a worldwide drum circle, all inclusive. And with that, the word got out that there was going to be this coming together in Nevada on the dried lake bed for a medicine wheel and a drum circle. The this getting out prompted Huffington Post to write an article about this, which got a lot of people very excited. And challenging enough was that it also brought this news to the FBI that to them, the story of the ghost dance, because the Huffington Post posed it as a ghost dance, was that this is a war dance. And but what they've never understood, that this is a dance of all the tribes coming together. And with that, we set up and we created this this medicine wheel in the desert. And we, with that, we relit the fire from the ashes of the Shetland camp, and the ceremony was opened with Renee, a local Paiute who ceremonied on that land. As the day was moving on and the ceremonies were being presented, I remember looking up at the mountains and seeing a big rain cloud coming over the mountains. And this was really a difficult place to have a timing, to have a storm. With, you know, everyone would come together. This and it is the elders had gone to our community space. It was a dome we had set up for getting out of the heat and the gather. And in there they were starting their prayers and their preparation for the drum circle. We had already, the news of this was very big, and it was networked to 500 drum circles around the world that were going to commence at the same time. And with that, I'm looking at this rain coming in, the wind starts picking up, and these are like about 60-mile-per-hour gusts. And things are starting to just rip up off the ground, and we're running around trying to tie things down and get everything so things aren't flying around in the air. And with the rain, I was going, this is just not going to be good. This is going to be really messy, because the ground will just form around your feet, creating like blocks of cement on your feet if you walk. And so there's no way people can move around or anything. And after I finished trying to strap things down and take care of what the wind was tearing up, I moved into the dome where the elders had gathered, and I was there, and they were finishing up their prayers. And as they're finishing up the prayers, a chief stands up with this amazing headdress with feathers just spiraling out of it. It was amazing and beautiful. And he stands up and he says, "It's time." And with that, he led everyone out of the dome and into the light. And I was surprised that there was sun, not clouds. And as I step out behind all of them, they didn't even know how ferocious what was going on outside. And all of a sudden, I'm walking out and it's sunny, and everything was perfect, and there was never any rain. With that, we gather into the medicine wheel, and we gather to start the drum circle. And with that, as we're starting the various chiefs speak and talk about the ceremony that they're about to begin, and they start the blessing for the ceremony. And as Chase Iron Eyes gets up and starts talking, 2 fighter jets fly by, and one of the fighter jets flies over the medicine wheel and pulls up and breaks the sound barrier. And there was a big thud from that. And then the other jet follows and flies over the medicine wheel and pulls up into the sky and breaks the sound barrier, and another thud. And Chase Iron Eyes goes, "They beat their drums and we beat our drums, and we will pray." And with that, the drum circle began, and Mayan warriors, speakers came up with the 500 drum circles around the world, so bringing in the gathering of all the people. With that, I'm complete.
So the story that's calling out is one that I wrote, or it wrote me many years ago, and I haven't thought about it. And it kind of started screaming out last night. So it will be interesting to see what tumbles out. When spring comes to the mountains, my memories come as the flowers start to bloom. Looking down the gravel road, around the twists and turns as I come to where the old cabin was, where Sheila lived. With her brilliant red hair and her bright personality, she was the sparkling light that led all the children who lived on that mountain and around. She led us with her song. She taught us to garden. She had so many rituals. And I could be here for a long time talking about her, but I'm going to cut short to the last one that she taught us. When she came one night and said, "You need to come with us. It's solstice evening. We need to go up on the mountain to a special spring." And we went up there. Our eyes open, our hearts open, way before the time of cell phones and computers. And as we got to where the roots grew together and the two trees, that gateway, we stepped through and came to the spring that was held under the tree that grew like the palm of a hand. Holding that space, we gathered around. She smudged the space. She pulled out a couple feathers. She put them on the spring. She pulled out her pouch of tobacco. And she handed these scissors around and said, "Cut a lock of your hair. Take a lock of your hair and take a piece of tobacco. Put your prayers for what you want the world to become and put that there, floating in the spring." And she told this story. It was a story that long ago, the world, it was filled with color. It was filled with life. And yet this great fear came through and it plucked all the color out of the world. It pulled the red right off the throat of the hummingbird. It pulled the orange out of the sun, the yellow out of the sunflower, the green from the leaves all around the forest, the blue from the indigo bunting, and the purple from inside the blueberries. All of those colors were pulled away by that fear and frozen in this giant ice cube, this giant mountain of ice that was larger than anything the world had seen. And the people that lived around that block of ice, they divided into opinions that were black and white. There was no gray, there was nothing in between. It was all black and white, and this great fight began. And they were fighting. And this fight went on, and it locked those colors inside, and that block of ice, it just grew and grew and grew. There were a few people, as that was going on, that thought, why are we different? What is different? And they began to come and take pilgrimages to where that block of ice was. And those of the white and those of the black began to meet. And at first they were very suspicious. But then they realized we're not that differently. We're not having to be each other's enemy. And one day, so many people came that they encircled that block of ice. And as they encircled that block of ice, a little spark of a flame grew up inside. And that flame began to flicker and it grew brighter, and the ice began to melt. And as that ice melted away, the colors began to get released. The red jumped out onto the hummingbird, the orange into the sun, the yellow to the flowers, the greens into the forest, the blues into the bird, the indigo bunting, the purple into those magical, rare places when you would find it, the iris inside the blueberries. And as those colors were being released, dancing about, the spirit began to dance. And this spirit that was dancing, just like you're dancing, Liana, just like you're dancing, this woman was casting those colors out. And it was the spirit as the northern lights began to dance in the sky. And those lights were there. And as we looked, and Sheila was telling this story, It was as if she was casting those lights into the sky. And here in North Carolina, we looked up. And for the first time ever, we saw the northern lights dancing. Why, we knew that our prayers had been heard. And that story, it was really, really, really important for us. We didn't know how important it was. It was the last story she ever shared with us. And when the mountain that she lived on, there was a road they were putting through and they tore part of it away. And that mountain separated where she lived. That road separated where she lived from the mountain. And when they finished that mountain, she was gone. We went to the cabin and there was no sign. It was as if she hadn't really even been there. And so when Solstice came that year, we called around our friends and said, we have to gather up things. We gathered a white sheet and I grabbed the scissors and there were those 2 feathers. She had given me those 2 feathers in this story. And we went up on the mountain. We went up between those 2 trees where the roots grew together to where the spring was held. I put the feathers on the spring. Brian, he lit the sage and he smudged the circle. Susan, she had brought the scissors. Didn't say a word, just cut a lock of her hair and handed it around. And each of us did that. And we had a pack of tobacco and we put our prayers. And we began to tell that story. And as we were telling the story of the colors being stolen and the colors being locked in that mountain of ice and of the people gathering around and that flame beginning to flicker, we had a candle we had lit there and that flame began to get brighter and brighter and the wind began to glow and blow and that white sheet we had was lifted up into the air and it began to dance. And in the dancing of that white sheet in the air, we saw Sheila there, casting the colors out into the sky, one by one, the red to the hummingbird, the orange to the sun, the yellow to the sunflower, the greens back into all the leaves in the forest, the blue to the indigo bunting and the birds, the purple into the blueberry, the iris. And then we looked as that sheet fell to the ground. The northern lights, they were dancing in the sky. And we knew that wherever Sheila was, that our prayers were heard and that life would continue on and we needed to remember these stories and this love. That's the story of Sheila and the Northern Lights.
I'm going to start with a poem that I wrote when sitting under a tree in my backyard here in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Under the trees. The wind picks up as I sit under the trees. Coming in from the south, I hear it approach as it quickens across the canopy of leaves. Raindrops and morning dew sitting undisturbed in the sunrise drop to the leaves below, splattering and pattering above my head on the leaves between us. Only 1 1/2 drops make it down to me, touching my arm and my forehead and kissing my exposed heart. Who wants to know how I started my path walking for peace? Or if you want some ghost stories and stories of those travels, or just straight old ghost stories, one long ghost story that spans many years and many locations.
I vote for a story about your life, not a ghost story. A story about how you're walking for peace.
Me
Something
too. Me
autobiographical.
too. And
I second, third that.
me,
I will
me
say the
third,
ghost
me
stories
fourth.
are from,
May 5th.
sounds like you guys
It's
know
like
what
an
you want.
auction.
Okay, so as you all know, shortly after I finished my college at UMass, where I was studying interior design and architecture, I really was at a bit of a loss for what to do with my life. And while I was going through that period, I got a notification from a friend of mine, Ron Holler. I think some of you know him, that he was going to go on a walk for global nuclear disarmament across the United States. And that really piqued my curiosity and touched me. So I decided to go. And while I was on that walk, I was in, I think it was probably Indiana. And we would walk. It was a group of about, at that time, about 600 to 700 people walking. They had started in Los Angeles. I happened to be in China at the time when they started, so I actually started in Iowa. But it was about 600-700 people at that point. And in the cities, the large cities, we would all walk closer together in a group, and be people watching the roads and corners and everything. And it was a production that thousands of people came to watch. And but in the country, when we were walking across the countryside, we could stretch out for miles. The daily walk was anywhere from 12 to 25 miles a day. And so I was in this beautiful countryside walking along by myself and just being quiet with all of that. And as I'm coming up to a clearing, I noticed that there's a little, I honestly can't remember if it was a church or a schoolhouse on my left-hand side, and the sun just streaming down and striking that building. And I hear this grinding motor sound coming from up ahead of me as I'm walking. I'm walking by myself. There are groups of people in front of me and behind me. And as you walk along, or as I walked along, and many did, when a car went by or people went by, you would throw the peace sign out, and they would either yell at you or cheer for you or do something like that. But I hear this grinding. It's like this heavy machinery coming, and I'm like, what is that? And over the crest of the hill comes a school bus. And hanging out of every window on that school bus were the children. That was a full school bus of screaming, cheering, peace sign throwing children. And I actually dropped to my knees and cried. It touched me so much. And that's when I realized that this was the reason I was doing it. I was doing it for the children. And that from that moment on, it became a much clearer road for me and a path for my whole life. So, as some of you know, I've been on many walks across many, many, many countries and locations, and meeting with people who are even in war zones and people that are going through suffering. It really, I have to say that it isn't really until now that I'm past 60 that it's really starting to come home to roost in me. The path from here on becomes even clearer as I get closer to the presumed end. And so I'm going to be working with children again. As some of you know, I drive a school bus right now. No coincidence there. And I'm working on becoming a teacher, a certified teacher of meditation, of mindfulness meditation. And I'm really hoping to be working not only in the schools, but in a non-secular way from people from all different groups and religions. So wish me luck. That's how I started. So peace. Love you all.
Sending peace. Nice to see you, Brian.
Wow, that's beautiful.
World
Oh,
peace.
I love
Peace
it.
world. Together. Oh wait, never mind.
Oh,
Maya, are you ready?
as ready as I can be. That was beautiful, Brian. It's so funny. It's so cool that now you're driving a school bus. That makes it way more complete. Yeah, I'll tell a little bit. As many of you know, I'm taking care of my 92-year-old mom, and I just haven't had time to set up. And the whole phone call I've been enjoying listening, but sort of semi uncomfortable because I'm not set up very well. So here goes. I'm kind of lift the phone a little by putting a book of the Messiah under it. I'm going to try to use a virtual background to tell you a little. This story relates to David's story of color, to night and dark and light, to children, to masks, to holiness, to traveling inward and outward. And so it'll be my first time trying to put words to it and trying to do it sort of briefly tonight. It's about the time recently in March in India during a festival called Holi, Holi, which is very holy. And it is, yet it doesn't mean holy, Holy, as it does to us, but it's a very holy festival that has an amazing story of purification and fire killing the evil and the light rising. And it has amazing characters. And I'm not going to go into that backstory right now. But for me, I really wanted to see Holi in the state of Gujarat in the north because they don't celebrate it as much in the south where I'd been. And I was going to Gujarat to work with tribal children in a Gandhian ashram. So this really relates to Brian's story. So I was really excited that I made it to Gujarat shortly after President Trump had been there and just on time for Holi. And let's see if I can get any of the virtual background. Let's see. It's nothing like the fire of Holi. So I'll just use words though. So I went to the city of Ahmedabad in Gujarat, and just on time for the first day of Holi, I was driven out very, very early in the morning as the sun was rising in a full globe to this tribal area way, way out where this huge ashram for children, Gandhian ashram is. And I had really mixed feelings about any school that would take tribal children and basically on one level try to give them advantage and empowerment through education. And then on the other hand, the dilemma is it's assimilating them into the mainstream culture, which was a big struggle for me. So I was really happy when I found out the school was actually closed for the whole week for Holi, and I didn't even have to face that assimilation piece right away. I could go right out by Jeep on bumpy, long, curving, rocky roads to a village, not even a village, to a man named Anandbai. Bai means brother. He had very sunken cheeks, but very sunken here where the hollow is, but very round here. And I have to get you a photo of him. And he was very brown and he had an amazing smile. And he became my tribal father for the night. And I kept hoping that him and his wife and his daughters and his son-in-laws would walk me to the fire at night. Holy has all people wear these masks and they throw, and it was before COVID became a big thing. And there was all this mask energy because all kinds of pots of colored water and colored powder are thrown onto everybody and everything. The sheeps turn pink and blue and purple. It's like a Chagall painting. The cows turn purple and green and orange. And it's something about rebelling against society's oppression and structure. And it's then at night, people come in and they make this giant potluck bonfire, meaning everybody brings the wood, everybody brings the logs. But I kept wondering why nobody seemed to be talking about going to the bonfire. Everybody started getting ready for bed amongst the water buffaloes, amongst the cows, amongst the lambs and the sheep in this amazing little tribal abode. That was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever stayed, up in the mountains, and the mountains had faces. And I thought, I couldn't even really speak the language, but I started to kind of like, to one of the girls kept saying, holy, walking, holy, fire. And she said, maybe, sleep. So I gave up. I went to sleep, but I set my alarm for 10 because I had been told that it would take about an hour to walk to this thing in the hills and the mountains, and that I'm going to turn this fire thing off behind me. I can't stand it. That I thought maybe something would happen if I woke up at 10. And sure enough, when I woke up at 10, several of the family members were sleeping around me, but the daughter and the father, Anandbai, got my desire. And desire was so strong in me. I think they understood as hosts that it would be good if they took me to this fire. And we walked through the dark, really dark, for about 45 minutes in our flip-flops. And as we got closer, we could hear the drumming more and more and more. We got to the fire, and all these women were dressed in their absolute tribal beauty, the most beautiful skirts and long arms of bangles and embroidered and mirrored scarves, and these incredible rhythm of dancing that felt like the ocean coming in and out, the way they moved in and out in lines. And then the men were dancing more in white and with turbans in another area, and then sometimes they would mix. But to make the long story short, and hopefully I'll really share some beautiful photos I got even in the dark. After about 2 hours there, including some uncomfortable moments where some young men ran by and grabbed my breast, which was totally uncomfortable. But everything else was wonderful. But I was an oddball. I was the white woman, in the middle of this sea of tribal people who were very much in a different culture than I had ever been in. They were still mostly pastoral or sheep and goat herders and farmers of mustard and fennel and wheat. And they were so far out from city lights and from radios and everything. It was really, really an eye opener for me to live that way, even for a night. So the fire went on and I danced with them. And the next day that night we walked back under the full moon, because Holi's always on a full moon. And I felt so fulfilled, so deeply fulfilled, like some deep ancient root in me had been met. And I went to bed amongst the family on a amazing woven cot out on their sort of, it's sort of like a stucco porch, and all the animals are right there. You can just feel the breath of the water buffalo. Luckily they have good breath because they eat so well, and the lambs and the goats and the sheep. And then in the morning, I kept hearing this crying. And it was so painful, the crying. I thought, oh no, don't tell me maybe there's some kind of abuse going on in this household. Maybe one of the daughters and husband is abusive, or there's some tragedy going on here. And the crying was like the word keening. I'd never heard anything so sorrowful in my life. I won't even try to do it because it would almost embarrass me to replicate it. It was so private and so deep. It filled up the valley. It filled up the craggy faces of the mountains. It sucked in the light of the fire from the night before and it put it into the rising sun. And after a while, I couldn't stand it. I thought, if somebody's really hurt, I better go help. I better go at least check. So I walked out behind the house and followed the sounds. And there was the mother who hadn't wanted to go to Holy the night before, which had been a surprise to me. And her breasts were bared. Her small, frail, powerful brown body was racking with pain as she held her chest, crying and lowering her head up and down to the stones of the earth there. And I felt that it wasn't my place to stay there. I knew she saw me and I knew it was private and I walked away, but I was glad it wasn't an abuse situation. And I had a sense of what it was. And I'm not quite sure how to tell this because I'm going on longer than I thought I would. But I will say, without making it a big story, that I had seen a photo of a very handsome man earlier, the day before, that one of the daughters explained was her son. But she had a living handsome son who looked very like it. So I wasn't sure if it was the living handsome son or somehow some other son who was away or this or that. Well, I found out that morning that this particular son in the photo was the one she was crying about, and he had died in a drunken driving accident where the other drivers were drunk just a few weeks ago. And she didn't want to go to Holy the night before because it would have been the first and only Holy that she had ever gone to without an intact family, without her son. And it was just too much for her to bear. So to end the story, this light and dark, I felt in her crying, I had never experienced the fullness of expression of grief, except for in one ritual I did with Maladoma Some's wife, so Banfu. When she was done with that grieving, she buttoned back up the beautiful silver buttons of her incredible tribal shirt that also had her name, Bobby, embroidered on it. And she came back to the front of this strange stucco house. And the rest of the day, she smiled and she made me food and she enjoyed my company as if, in a way, she was totally full again, as if the light had fully re-entered her. And I had to leave at the end of that day. And I've been thinking of her ever since and whether I could send her some meaningful gift. And I will share some of the photos, but it was such a day, a night, a sort of 24-hour journey of light and darkness and sadness and joy. And I really think I need to work on the story to bring it out better, but I hope you got a feeling from it. Thank you.
I'm in the middle of moving out, helping my parents move out of my childhood home. And this is my last day here. And I've actually just, so I've been kind of in and out of listening to people as I've been the last person here to clean out this house that held my sister and my parents' life for the last 25 years. And so I've just been trying to take in this home, and it feels appropriate with this. I see it as the theme of going internal and a form of death, and just like being with that and having me being here for the last day of this house being ours. And just noticing how the light hits different parts of the house and like taking in these trees and taking in this land that I grew up on. And yeah, just listening to the story of this house, like holding space to listen to this, to whatever this house has to share, and this land and these trees and these birds have to share. So that's what I've been doing today. And I guess like a mini story is that yesterday I was walking around this area with one of the people I'm seeing, and I live by waterways by the bay. I'm in the Bay Area on the West Coast in California, and a ray came up to meet us and just like opened its mouth and its whole face and went back, like came out for about like 15 seconds and went back down into the water and showed us its tail. And I'd never seen that before in all the years that I've been here. So that was really exciting. And just, yeah, I feel like I just want to show like the light right now through the trees. Yeah. And I'm a musician, so I've been like playing my music throughout the house. And this is where we used to have Christmas, in this room, which we're not doing this year. And Liana, this is where I had Bear when I babysat Bear for like a week. This is also where my dog died, and my dog knew Liana's dog. So many memories. Is there any kind of theme? Liana, do you have a word?
Oh,
I actually think, what?
Rainbow light.
Rainbow light. Oh my gosh, do you know that that's an actual song?
No.
I don't think I can sing that song right now, but I'll post it. I'll send it to you. I think I'm gonna sing a song called Ancestors into Rebirth.
Yes, go for it. What's it called?
But there's a song called Rainbow Light by, I can't remember her name right now. I thank you for all that you are. I thank you for all that you thought. I thank you for all that you thought. I thank you for all that you taught. I can hear you, I can feel you, I am listening, I love you, I can hear you, I can feel you, I am listening, I am listening, I am listening, I am listening, and it's time to move on. It's time to move on. It's time to move on. It's time to be free. Thank you, I love you, I embrace the joy and release the pain. Thank you, I release you, it's time for our healing. Thank you, I love you, I embrace the joy and release the pain. Thank you, I release you, it's time for our healing. Yeah. It's time for our healing. It's time to be freely living. It's time to
truly you. Boy, that's truly death to the ways that get in the way of me being who I am. I release all constructs and contracts that are no longer aligned. I am done, 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 I am done. I release it all. I release, I release, I release, I release, I release to receive more that's truly me. 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 Rebirth to blossom, rebirth to bloom, rebirth to welcome. Boy, that's truly you. Rebirth to blossom, rebirth to bloom, rebirth to welcome. Boy, that's truly you. Rebirth to blossom, rebirth to bloom, rebirth to welcome. Boy, that's truly you. Rebirth to blossom, rebirth to bloom, rebirth to welcome. Boy, that's truly you. Rebirth to blossom, rebirth to bloom, rebirth to welcome. Boy, that's truly you. Rebirth to blossom, rebirth to bloom, rebirth to welcome. Boy, that's truly you.
Thank you, Liana and
Look
John
forward
and
to the
Neil.
next one.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Oh, so lovely. Thank you, Liana.
Yes, my
Yeah.
pleasure.
Oh my God.
Let's celebrate pleasure. Let's party.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you, Nana.
Liana, I want to